Hey, what's up, y'all, and welcome back to another Alternative Factuals video. Today we're going to be covering Bitterroot. Bitterroot number 1. I want to kind of dip my toe into this series. A few people wanted me to cover it. I personally have been enjoying it. I wanted to cover it. I just never got around to it, but today's your lucky day. And despite what the title says, it is actually very much relevant to what we're going to be reading, even in this first issue, and it ties into a lot of what we're going to be reading going forward in this story. So as outrageous as it may seem, I promise it's very much relevant. So before we do anything like this, if you want to make sure you keep up with me breaking down stories like this, you know, subscribe and leave a comment down below and all that stuff, and then I'll continue to do stuff like this. Let me know that you enjoy it, and let's get into Bitterroot. So Bitterroot, the authors are David F. Walker and Chuck Brown. Currently Bitterroot, I think, is issues 1 through 8 that's available right now. I might be wrong about that, but I mean, I guess that doesn't really matter. It's not super relevant, but this story kind of follows what they call the Sange family, which they take place, or this whole kind of family situation takes place in the 1920s during the Harlem Renaissance. So really dope point in time when it comes to music, and a lot of culture that comes out of the black community, even the Latin community. There's a lot of stuff going on in the 1920s, but obviously this is during a time when racism was at its peak. And well, me personally, I don't think it was at its peak. Technically, slavery is racism at its peak, but it was a point in time when racism was extremely high in America specifically. So let's kind of just dive into the story. Now, on the first page off the rip, we do know for a fact that this couple seems to have came from this like jazz party, because back in the day, you already know, the Apollo was popping off crazy hard, and you know, everyone vibed in the Apollo. Everyone enjoyed the Harlem Renaissance because that was when music, that was when food, that was when everything was fire. But then somehow they seem to have gotten attacked by some creature, and they kind of just disappear. So then we move on to the next day, and this is when we start to catch up with the Sange family. Now, it seems like a lot of people in Harlem, in New York, seem to know who they are and a little bit of what they do. Even the police seem to have some sort of understanding, because an officer refers to what they do as mumbo jumbo, which often people will use once, you know, they're, let's say, Catholic or Christian, and then anything that is not, you know, kind of aligned with the main forms of what their beliefs are, they either classify it as witchcraft or mumbo jumbo, whatever the case may be. Very obvious term, but just wanted to break that down. Now we see that we have two members of the Sange family. One is an older woman who we're going to get her name a little bit later. Where you can see her job is mostly just mixing up herbs and different things that have various different effects on certain creatures. And then she has, I believe, is her granddaughter. So we can understand that they believe in this story already that women should be the ones who are mixing up the herbs, who go out and kind of just gather the materials they need for these herbs in order to mix up technically potions, while the men go out and fight. And we get confirmation of this actually when we actually catch up with Cullen and Berg, who are cousins as well, and they are fighting something that they call a Jinnu. And Jinnu are creatures that are very interesting, and I'm going to get to it. I promise. It's very important on who the Jinnu are, and the reason why they were created, and the reason why they turn, and so on and so forth. But we catch up with them where they're trying to at least show that, you know, when you join to be a part of the Sange family, you have to know how to defend yourself against these creatures. So at the end of the day, you see Cullen is the one mostly doing the fighting, while Berg is sitting on the side just kind of enjoying it, like laughing at his cousin, you know, and his cousin's like, why don't you come help me? He's like, well, you have to learn how to defend yourself. And also one thing that we're noticing is that Berg is highly intelligent. Despite his size, and you would assume he's like this crazy brute, he's actually extremely intelligent. But for the most part, eventually Berg doesn't really do much of anything, but also Cullen seems to kind of lose control of the creature for a little bit. But then that's when we go back downstairs to the conversation that's being had between the granddaughter and the grandmother. Now the granddaughter feels very passionately about being able to fight Jinnu, and the fact that women don't have to only work in making potions. They don't have to do that. They don't have to make serums. They don't have to only do that. They can fight too. But grandmother, or Grandma Etta, referred to in this, she believes that women, their place belongs in the kitchen cooking up these serums and potions. So you already know she wasn't having that. So eventually the granddaughter goes upstairs, and then she starts washing this monster hard body way better than Cullen ever could. And she like just grabbed the staff and was just like, I'm about to give you this work, boy. She hit him with a crazy right, got that staff, and was like, I'm about to knock you out into next week. And sure enough, this monster was laid out easy. So once they kind of have this conversation, you kind of figure out their motivations, at least these three characters, and their purpose when it comes to Genu and what these creatures are, and how they kind of go about fixing them and kind of just making sure that they go back to living the lives that they previously had, since technically they are still human. So at this point, we're actually going to the west side of Harlem, San Juan Hill, where we catch up with Dr. Sylvester, who's been searching for something. We don't know what this something is quite yet, but we know he's searching for something in particular, and that something is tied to the Sange family. So he's kind of just like talking, having a conversation casually, and then his assistant or whoever she is just hands him this bird, and they're just talking, chatting, and the next thing you know, he just kills the bird on the spot out of nowhere, just crushes the bird. And I guess they did something to the bird. I guess that's a part of this whatever ritual, or maybe just the serum, whatever they're using. They was like, okay, do you see something? Now the combination of him actually like crushing this bird, and it looks like he ate it. It looks like he can see, like not just regular see. I mean, like he can see something like from a distance, like a supernatural kind of eyesight. And then it looks like he sees the Sange family as they're fighting, as they were on the roof dealing with that monster, and realizing that they're pathetic. So one thing we can gather from this part of the story already, and applying it to whatever we know as, you know, we've kind of moved forward, is that one, there's something wrong with him, because he has to take an injection that keeps whatever, you know, at bay. That's what it is. And two, he's trying to get the Sanges on his side for whatever reason, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be more related to the story as we find out later on that there are not just Genu, there are other various creatures out there that come into existence for many different reasons, but he needs them on their side, and he's watching the family, knowing how powerful and how experienced they are when it comes to these monsters. Because one thing we're going to find out later on in the story, a couple issues from now, is that this family has been hunting creatures like this for generations, and we can assume that they probably started this around slavery time. So let's, you know, that's just me assuming, but moving on along now. So we catch up with Ma Etta, who is essentially just making these potions, what basically helps turn these people who are turned into Genu back into their human form. And once again, she's having a discussion with Ma Etta that, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I want to do my part, I want to help, I believe in the cause, but I don't believe that my only cause is to be grinding up herbs and roots when she can fight. And we saw this, she is very lethal with them hands, and she's lethal with that staff. But you already know what Ma Etta thinks about that situation, so I guess it's kind of no point in her kind of going over with it. And especially because Ma Etta expressed that she loves her very much, and she cannot deal with the loss of somebody else, meaning they've lost a lot of people over the years because the nature of their job is very dangerous, and pretty much the reason why she is very much hard on her to stay inside this kitchen area where they're mixing up these herbs and roots is because the cousin who she's talking to, Ma Etta's talking to, her mother died, and she wants to make sure that everything stays good. She wants to make sure her granddaughter stays alive. And I mean, that's a very fair response to the situation. I can't be mad at her for feeling that way. But you see that she's giving basically Cullen the needle that's going to actually help bring the creatures back to their human form, and hopefully they'll stay that way. So we see that she's handing off the needle, and essentially they're going to give them to the people. And he says like, oh, this is not my favorite part. Like, they always scream super loud, but nonetheless, in terms of what Berg says, he says, "Commendable effort, young sir, much better than last time. Now let us deliver these cleansed souls before the sun starts to rise." So they've cleansed these people of supposedly whatever's going on with their souls, or whatever this, you know, curse is or magic is that causes them to transform. And then we move on along to St. Nicholas Park in Harlem an hour later. Now essentially Berg and Cullen get caught up with the police because they're actually dumping these people back into the park, and you already know what's about to happen. It's 1920s. They see black people with a bunch of white bodies. You already know what's going to happen. They don't want to hear nothing. They already made up in their mind they about to pull the trigger. And for a second I got nervous, like, don't tell me like we spent all this time already getting to know them just for them to get clapped by the police. But fortunately, well, I wouldn't say fortunately, but in this case I would say fortunately, right when they're about to get clapped by the police, they've been kind of notified in the area. The police have been notified that people have been going missing. Now, the people haven't been going missing by something human. They've been going missing by something supernatural. And lo and behold, right behind the police officers, right when they shoot, this creature pops up. And then right when that creature pops up, they kill both of the police officers, swift and easy, and took one of their heads smooth off. And then that's pretty much how you leave it when it comes to that particular interaction with the police. Now, that same night, at that same time, the comic moves to Mississippi, and this is where I'm getting into the details of how the title relates to a lot of the story that we're talking about, and it relates to the title of this video. So we catch up to a KKK mob, and they are beating the dog snot out of this black dude. Supposedly he was talking to some white girl, and this one white dude is like going extra hard, like, you'll learn your lesson, you'll learn not to mess with white women. And then he says, I didn't do nothing. Now, we already know this is very reminiscent of Emmett Till and that whole situation where we found out that he never did anything, but they killed him anyway, despite the fact that he was innocent. But they're about to hang him. You see the lynch, and the next thing you know, there's another person who pops up with this very funky looking gun, who pretty much headshots all of them except for the white dude who was going super in about beating him up, and then everyone's pretty much laid out on the floor dead. But come back for the next video, because we're going to discuss in detail what happens after that. But just to give you a little bit of taste of what to expect, this is what the whole video is kind of circling about when it comes to the Genu. A lot of these supernatural creatures are actually being created as a form of manifesting whatever preconceived bias or hatred they may have against someone or something. So the cool thing about this series is that these creatures only come from what they believe. It's not a manifestation of anybody else. It's not a manifestation of, let's say, somebody else putting a curse on them. The Genu themselves have the abilities to transform into monsters because it is simply just a manifestation of any negative or out of control emotions that they have not taken the time to resolve within themselves. But using certain herbs and roots like the Senge family has developed, they can turn them back to their human form. But nonetheless, people can turn, anyone in theory can turn into a Sinu. So what does that mean for even people of color in this story, and pretty much white people like the title? Well, the reason why a lot of this has to do with race is because, one, it's the 1920s, and what basically these creatures represent is a personified representation of their hatred, their bias, their racism, and their bigotry. So it gives it a physical form for us readers to understand why they're attacking these people, especially when we find out other details related to the KKK and the reason why this dude actually showed up and shot them all. Hatred is a manifestation that causes them to transform into creatures that are just unequivocally powerful, but they're also just complete mindless, creatures in itself. And it's very much a reflection of people who have these extreme views on any group of people with no sense of logic, and they tend to kind of find comfort in that, and they don't seem to want to change until something happens to them that's very much reminiscent of the reason why they hate or feel uncomfortable with a particular group of people. But I'm not going to get the super details, because the next video, when we talk about issue number 2, that's when we get into the real nitty-gritty of why the KKK was kind of pretty much killed. But if you want to continue with the story, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe, leave your comments down below, and I hope to see you later on. Peace out.